Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of American Gods, as well as the latest episode of Twin Peaks. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of American Gods, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Twin Peaks. But the first thing we're going to talk about is this week's episode of American Gods. A very good episode, a very interesting story this week. Obviously, one storyline this episode is Mads, Laura kind of have to join up because it's like she's kind of crap out of luck because Wednesday and Shadow left and she's trying to obviously chase after them. Two people who can't stand each other the most are now forced to work together. And what I also found it very interesting is the fact is that the person they end up kind of joining is Salim. He's the guy from the Jin storyline. Basically, he's going out because I didn't understand that. I was thinking that was supposed to represent he became the new Jin. It was like, no, he was like, oh, the Jin left and he wanted to track him down because it's like basically he left his entire life behind because it's like, oh, he got caught up in all basically the bullshit of life, and it's just like, no, I don't want that anymore. The Jin showed me a different way, something bigger, something greater, and I want, he fell in love. I mean, I interpret that as love. Mads just kind of cracks jokes about him, making like, oh, basically you got laid and everything, and just kind of is making it like, oh, that's enough to kind of get you to be so smitten the way you are and stuff like that. Basically, it's a very interesting union of people deciding like, hey, we're going to travel together, mainly because we're all here for our own reasons, but in the long run, it's because, we're all kind of almost in a sense after the same thing. I mean, Laura can probably understand exactly where Salim is coming from because it's like, her whole situation with Shadow. And that's what Mads kind of brings up too. It's like, just move on. The fact of the matter is that, I mean, obviously he moved on because he tasted, he could taste was death and cigarettes. So he's just like, oh, saying basically like, oh, you felt something, but are you sure that was something you felt? What did you have before? It's like, well, yeah, I had cigarettes before. It's like, oh, maybe that's what you felt. Maybe it wasn't even like, your heart beating. It's like, the fact of the matter is you're dead and everything, and you're still kind of clinging to the life you had before. Why don't you go out and try and find a new life? But for her, she's like, Shadow's the only thing that makes her feel, so she has to, I mean, when you actually look at it, it's very sad because, I mean, especially as the episode progresses, you do see that it looks like looks worse and worse in the sense of it looks like her eyes are a little baggier. It just looks like she's more run down. I mean, Mads has constantly talked about the fact that soon enough, especially when the summer heat kind of hits you, eventually your skin's going to turn to soup and fall off. Said that last episode, reiterates it this episode. And I love that the fact that he doesn't even call her by her name. I don't even know if he really knows her name. I don't think he really cares enough to know because all he's just like, oh, dead wife this, dead wife. Oh, you're a horrible person, dead wife. Still reminds me of the last episode. You're an asshole, dead wife. You're an asshole, dead wife. It's sad the fact is that she is clinging on to it. She likes to pretend like her old life, like, oh yeah, like in her words, like, fuck those assholes. That basically like her life, she's like, oh, like the fact of the matter is I'll never get to hear my mom's call my name again or her cooking is like good riddance, type of thing. But it's like they're in Indiana and stuff like that, but it still doesn't, because they're supposed to be going to Kentucky. But, she's just kind of like, still, Salim while Mads is in the back sleeping, just kind of a middle finger to him. Because, he acts like a douchebag, but I mean, he is trying to help. That he is saying that he wants to help her come back to life because if she comes back to life, then he can get his coin back because she won't need the coin anymore. The coin is basically helping her sustain her existence as it is now. So if he's able to help her resurrect, then. And basically, it's like, oh, my buddy, Jesus Christ, you need a resurrection. Well, she was like, wait, did you just name drop Jesus? He's like, yeah. She's like, almost like as a friend of a friend. He's like, well, it is a friend of a friend. It's like a friend of a friend who there's a guy that stands beside him. That guy is a guy you need. So, as a leprechaun, does he actually know Jesus? I mean, we've heard, Mr. Wednesday talk about the fact is that there's multiple Jesuses, especially when you had that opening. Because I'm very curious about what that opening's supposed to represent. Because obviously you have all those people crossing and like, if you can't swim, don't go. One of the guys does anyway, and he's about to drown. But I would assume Jesus picks him up, pulls him out of the water, and saves him. But then guys show up and start shooting and killing them. Chest and in his hand, so it's like what's that supposed to represent? Like, is it like, because immediately to my brain was like, okay, so is there a ramification for someone not making it across? Like, the fact is that he almost drowned. Was that kind of retribution for that? Like, for them just, I mean, I just didn't understand, like, what that exactly meant. I mean, and is that one of said Jesuses that Mr. Wednesday has talked about previously? Could this be the same Jesus that Mads is talking about? And was Mads even referring to the fact is that he knew a Jesus? Or was he just which Jesus does he know? Was it that said Jesus or a different one of the multitude of Jesuses? Because the question is, like, what will be there for her? Like, I mean, truth be told, is there any point to living for Laura? I mean, I know that's super sad to say, but it's like, for her, it's like, Shadow's kind of all she has, and it's like that's the one thing she's like, you know, it's kind of like, once again, Mads keep throwing it in her face, like, what the hell is it for you? You can't have your old life back. So even if you come back to life and everything, like, you won't have your old life anymore. So what will you do? Like, I mean, that's the question. Like, is Laura only doing this because she doesn't have anywhere else to go? Because Mr. Wednesday kind of brings it up in the episode that basically the dead come back and they come back for a purpose. It's like, what is Laura's purpose? Is her purpose, like, you know, to be with Shadow again, or what? She's supposed to help him? You know, what's this whole thing about? And also, what I thought was kind of interesting about this episode too is when Mr. Wednesday found out about Laura, he's like, wait, what? It's like, oh, was she a ghost, or she real, or what? He's like, oh, the fact, you know, kind of brings up, you know, what I said earlier about, like, oh, the dead coming back with a purpose. And also, he saw Laura in the rear, like, the mirror, he saw her kind of chasing off the car. He turned up the music and drove, even though she was screaming Shadow's name, just to keep them separated. So whatever plan he has for Shadow, he's trying to create that distance. Like, he wants to forge Shadow. I would assume it's kind of like forging Shadow into a weapon, and he needs all, like, loose ends. Like, because obviously throughout this episode, and it's something Mr. Winston kind of calls him out for. It's like, hey, you're focused on other things. You knew, oh, it's Laura, isn't it? It's like, I think he's trying to cut all ties with them, try to keep a distance between them, because that's, if he can keep Shadow like that. Because I think with each step, Shadow comes closer and closer to kind of quote-unquote being his. But I think Laura kind of stepped in and kind of complicated things. Because obviously he's like, I can't tell you exactly who I am because you won't believe me. Because, like, you know, Shadow's at that point where he is quite starting to believe. I mean, truth be told, he's like, I don't know what I believe. I do know that my dead wife is here and everything. But it's still something that Mr. Wednesday is trying to ease his way into it. Like, for what purpose? Like, what does Shadow, like, what role does Shadow play in all of this? Especially in this episode when they end up going to a place called Vulcan, Virginia, where you meet another god. Very interesting dude. Basically, he's kind of like the god of volcanoes. It's what I wonder, is that what Vulcan means? I kept assuming that's what that meant, but nevertheless. Played by, I can't think of the actor's name. Is it Corbin Benson? He played, God, I can't remember his character's name, but I refer to him as Papa Spencer from the TV show Psych. You know, Sean's dad. I was like, dude. Basically, he has this whole system of like, oh yeah, there's like these faulty railings that people end up falling into the forge, and that's sacrifices. And then basically insurance companies feel like, basically when it comes down to it, the companies, like, people are like, it's a lot cheaper just to settle rather than kind of fixing everything, you know, making sure the railings are secure and stuff like that. A settlement's a lot cheaper. And so it's like, oh yeah, sacrifices happen every once in a while. I mean, on a case, there might be the possibility of kind of an intentional sacrifice, more like a, oh yeah, taking a sacrifice into your own hand, which is becoming a conversation between Mr. Wednesday and, I'll refer to him as Vulcan. Once again, I don't know that's his name. I didn't check to see what his name was, but it's like, I'm just going to refer to him as Vulcan, dude. And the fact of the matter is, he's kind of like, oh yeah, you know, back in the day, you used to kind of make, you know, like, oh, people, you know, sacrifice themselves and everything. He's like, oh yeah, no one was, you know, going to sacrifice themselves in my name or whatever is what Mr. Wednesday was saying. But he's like, oh, but you can always sacrifice, you know, you can always sacrifice yourself. You used to do that back in the day. And the Shadow kind of looks at him, and Mr. Wednesday kind of looks at him. So, but basically, Mr. Wednesday's kind of putting it like, oh yeah, that was a very long time ago. But so the question is, why sacrifice then and not sacrifice now is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, we still don't 100%. Obviously, this whole thing's about war. Like, you know, the way Vulcan did was kind of like, are you trying to be a martyr or something like that? He's like, no, I'm not trying to be a martyr, because basically it's like, hey, these guys are trying to hold us down, try to keep us chained down. It's like, well, let's not do that. Let's not be a part of that. How about we just, rise up and fight back? The whole point was like, hey, to get him on Mr. Wednesday's side. What she said, like, oh yeah, I'm on your side. Even forged Mr. Wednesday a sword, but he got in contact with the new gods and was like, yeah, I told him exactly where you were, because he's like, because for him, it's all about the thing is that no one prayed to him. Everyone forgot his name, but the new gods basically put him in a position where it's like, this is a benefit situation. It's like joining up with Mr. Wednesday, all that's going to do is cause more problems for him. It's like, I prefer a neutral stance in all this, especially considering the fact is that the new gods are helping me, because of them, people speak my name, they pray to me, that basically the prayers are like a bullet, because to him, guns are modern day volcanoes that erupt with such power and force. It's kind of interesting, he even made those snide comments against Shadow too. He's like, oh, you like this hanging tree? He's like, no, I don't. Even Shadow kind of calls it out. Like, he's alluding to the fact is that I got hung. Like, did you tell him? And this was like, didn't even come cross my mind to even bring it up. So it's like, did he hear the whispers about what happened to Shadow, or just some inkling, or what the hell was that? And even at one point, he was like, oh yeah, like sharing a drink with Mr. Wednesday, but it's like, oh, there's none for you. And the Shadow's like, yo, what the hell is up with that? So part of me was like, is that a race thing, or is that kind of just a, no, you're a human thing, so stay the hell out of this? So once again, still don't know what the hell Shadow's whole purpose in all of this is. Like, what is he supposed to represent? I mean, as we continue to see, he isn't normal, because in his episode, he tapped into his powers or whatever, and was able to see Laura's situation, like see her and see what she was doing. So, and you can see like Mr. Wednesday smiling and everything, and once again saying the line of like, oh, can you let her fade away? Once again, just like trying to push that divide between them, because it's like, I guess she's a remnant of his past, and she will keep him there. She will keep him who he is now, rather than who he can become and who Mr. Wednesday needs him to be. At least that's how I see it. So wasn't quite sure how that whole situation with the Vulcan dude was going to end. Didn't expect it to end the way it did with Mr. Wednesday chopping off his head like that. I was like, oh, even Shadow's like, holy crap. Chopped his head off and then kicked him into the forge so that he forms with the bullets. And then Mr. Wednesday proceeded to piss on the forge, So it is like, yep, I'm laying down a curse on this entire town. It's like, so what the hell does that mean going forward for them? What does that necessarily mean? Because obviously we saw at the beginning, like, they shot the bullets up in the air. Everyone kind of scattered. The bullets eventually came back down. So does that mean something's going to malfunction the next time they do something like that? I mean, what happens to this town now that he's gone, now that they don't have him to, like, rally behind or kind of pray to? Many, many questions. Also, like, Mr. Wednesday was kind of like, yeah, the fact of the matter is you are on my side, making me this sword, and for that, they came here and killed you, and then he slices his head off, right? So is that him trying to set it up to make other people be like, oh no, did you hear what they did, to Vulcan dude? Oh man, they killed him because he sided with me, trying to rally sympathy from the other people that he might be recruiting. It's like, hey guys, you saw what they did? Oh, the new guys, they're total pieces of shit, right? Oh my god, they killed one of us. Now you have to join me and rise up. Don't you see what kind of pieces of crap they are? We can't be like under their thumb for too long. So once again, what is Mr. Wednesday up to? Like, what is his reason for doing it? Is it the fact of the matter is he can't do it on his own to make sure that he stays top dog? Is that what this is all about? Pride and position? The fact of the matter is, I've been top dog for so long, and we have these youngsters coming in trying to take my crown. Well, I'm gonna get and manipulate and use as many people as I need to get all the way to top, Shadow included. Because once again, it's like, because it kept wondering, because Mads kept saying, do not make a deal with him. And even in this episode, he's like, yeah, I was right over there when your hubby made a deal with the devil himself. So it's like, what are your true intentions, Mr. Wednesday? You're making it seem like you are legitimately like, oh, a fighter for justice, but at the end of the day, it does ultimately seem like you're in this for yourself. I mean, I guess you could argue like Mr. Wednesday's never really hid the fact is that he's done it for himself, but he seems like he makes it seem like, and that's kind of what Vulcan was kind of getting at. You making it seem like this is about everyone else, that you're doing what's right, but it's like, no, you're doing what's right for you. So, like I said, a very good episode. It's just like, I feel like I'm missing so much during this show that I feel like I need to rewatch a lot of it. It's just to kind of feel like I'm missing a lot of things. I'm misunderstanding a lot of stuff, mainly because I'm an idiot. But still doesn't change the fact is that it is a very interesting show, and I still enjoy it nonetheless. Even though I'm like confused on certain things that I'm sure some things are a lot more plain and simple than I give them credit to be. Like, they're not as confusing, but I'm just an idiot not grasping it for whatever reason. So I am very curious to find out, obviously where all these storylines head. Will Salim find, his Jinn once again? What's up with Laura? Will she go back to being alive? Will, because she can't stay this way forever. I mean, what is it, like, where does her story end? Does it end with her going back to the land of the dead? But, I mean, we know that there nothing awaits her, or does she go back to life? But even she comes back to life, will there be anything waiting for her there? Like, I feel like I said, like, Laura's just in that that spot of just, like, it's a phrase I've been saying a lot lately, I think. Damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. And also Matt, who's along with the ride because it's like, I want my coin back, dead wife. And also to see where next week's episode also takes Shadow and Mr. Wednesday in this whole grand scheme of things. Also, like, really quickly, I would know, I obviously throughout the episode I talked about it, but it's like, I'm very interested to see what other storylines kind of coincide going forward. Like, because as we saw, like, the Jinn storyline kind of came back around. Like, I thought those were just kind of solo one-off storylines, but maybe there's a lot more interest. Like, I feel like sometimes it's a situation where I feel like the message of those little parts at the beginning are supposed to reflect the message of the entire episode. So I always feel like they're kind of one-off things that they won't kind of pop up. But then again, like, I don't know if that counts because a lot, I mean, obviously this is setting up gods and stuff that, I get the feeling like eventually we'll meet later on down the road. But one of those beginning things was Anubis. But I don't know if, like, was that in the beginning or was that like in the middle? Because the Jinn thing was in the middle of an episode, so I don't know. Just I'm very curious to see like how much of that kind of goes full circle, comes back around. I get the feeling all of it is, considering the fact is it going through the trouble of setting it up and introducing it. So I feel like those are storylines that are going to cross over at some point. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. And now moving on to this week's episode of Twin Peaks. A very interesting episode, still weird and confusing as ever. This week we only have one episode this week, so I'm assuming the rest of the season is going to be like that. But in this episode, quite a few developments came up. For one, we find out that the body that was found with Ruth's severed head was in fact Dougie's body, which is like, okay, so if that's Dougie's body, what does that mean about the other Doug? Wait, what? Like, what does that mean? How did that happen? Are we getting into some like time travel stuff? Like, or maybe the fact of the matter is, I mean, I take it back. Now that I think about it, it's like, so Dougie always existed, but that Dougie we saw was a fake. Obviously, we know he was created. So he was created as a replacement. So the real Dougie was killed. Because immediately my brain was always like, oh, that's Garland's body. But it's like, no, it's just Garland's fingerprints. I don't know whether specific, because they were saying like, oh, there was an unknown male's, a John Doe's like fingerprints. I thought they were specifically talking about the body. Maybe they were, but at the very least, like fingerprints in there that they couldn't associate with anybody that turned out to be connected to Garland's, which I'll kind of get to in a second. But it's like, at first, and now I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's like, that makes a lot more sense. But then it's like, what's up with Dougie's wife? How would she not know? Did he always look a little bit like Cooper for that to work? Or what, are we on some level stuff of like, oh, messing with people's memories and type of thing? Like what's going on there? Like, are there a lot more like Cooper doppelgangers that we don't know about? Maybe he was originally like a doppelganger that got replaced by another doppelganger, or like what? Because it's like, how would she not know that was Dougie? Or maybe that whole thing is an elaborate ruse that basically Dougie, the real Dougie, didn't have anybody, and maybe immediately like the real Dougie got taken care of, and then this doppelganger Cooper who looks like Dougie came about. Not looks like him, but replaced him and started using the name Dougie. Maybe he doesn't actually have a girlfriend and or wife and, a kid and or stepson. Maybe that's all fabricated. Don't know. Like, it's hard to say what direction anything goes in this show. Side note, gotta go ahead and get it out of the way. So many damn familiar faces. I need to learn this actor's name because I see him all the time, but I feel so crappy I don't know his name. It's the actor who he's currently playing Blaine. He plays Blaine's dad on iZombie. Him, Jim Belushi, Ernie Hudson. I swear there was another one I recognized too, and I can't play. Oh, Amanda Seyfried. But yeah. She ends up playing, I think her character's name either Becky or Becca. I assume Shelley's daughter, which she's up with some dude that's like got kind of chewed out earlier in the episode at a job interview. Obviously, still kind of caught up in the whole drug thing. I'm trying to remember, like, I'm sitting here thinking about it. I was like, did Bobby and Shelley ever do drugs? Like, I should know that since I recently rewatched the show. I don't think they did. Obviously, like, Bobby and Laura, sure, but not Bobby and Shelley. But like, she's kind of caught up with kind of the boyfriend that you gotta obviously tell Shelley's not all that keen about. Plus the fact that she's always coming to Shelley about money. But then her and Norma, who we saw Norma pop up, they were kind of having a conversation of like, yeah, but things kind of don't always work out. Or, you know, you need to help her now because if you try to help her later, it's just going to be more catastrophe. We know that better than anyone. At first, I was wondering if that was them commenting on the fact that their current status, because we don't know about like Norma and Ed. Side note, it's something to me, like, ever since I originally watched the series and found this out later on, like, finding out that the actress who plays Norma is Rashida Jones' mom, that is so cool. I was like, what? It's gotta be so interesting, that conversation. Like, I'm sure her mom's done a lot of other stuff, but they'd be, like, connected to, like, such a culty, like, a show that has a quote-unquote cult following and everything like that. That's gotta be kind of cool in a way. I don't know. It's probably just kind of whatever, like, you know, the family, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to me. I was like, that's so cool. That's Rashida Jones' mom like that. It's so cool. Because I freaking adore Rashida Jones. She's like so beautiful, talented, and funny, just awesomeness. But nevertheless, I thought it was like, okay, we're talking about her situation, Ed, because we don't know where that ended up, or even her and Shelley and Bobby. We don't, like, I mean, but then again, I was like, maybe that's supposed to reflect other situations, like Shelley's situation with Leo originally, or Norma's situation with Hank. So maybe they were talking specifically about that because they're like, we didn't take the time to get help immediately, and then things kind of took a turn for terrible, you know, as things progress. So slowly but surely, we're kind of picking up and finding out about everyone. Like I said, it seems like it's a slow and steady process to be like, bam, bam, bam. This is them, blah, 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 blah. Everyone's kind of stories kind of slowly unraveling. But an interesting thing came up. Obviously, I brought up Ernie Hudson earlier in the episode, and the fact is that he, wasn't at the Pentagon that basically it's like, oh yeah, like Garland's prints kind of set off an alarm. Apparently, this isn't the first time. It's like the 16th time in like the past 25 years that Garland's fingerprints have set off. So it's like, I mean, granted, we don't know when Garland died in the show, like, because Bobby never really put a time frame. All we know is like before he died, like Cooper visited him. Obviously, we know that's doppelganger Cooper, which, I mean, I don't know, maybe somehow he got in contact with the real Cooper. I wouldn't think so, because I mean, no one's been able to enter the like Black Lodge, or at least it's always interesting because it's like, because it was always referred to as a waiting room. So I don't know if that waiting room is really considered a Black Lodge. I mean, that's really all we've ever seen of it. So I guess in its entirety, that is a Black Lodge. That's how I've always referred to it. And I guess I shouldn't start questioning myself now and just keep referring to it as that. So I assume it is doppelganger him. But it's like, I guess Garland must have died sometime after it, like early on in those 25 years, I'd assume, just for the fact that it said that. But I mean, we won't really know until that really comes up. But we do have someone going off to investigate, because obviously this is connected to that crime that's connected to Matthew Lillard, which also we know that his wife is dead, but then there's like the guy that was sleeping with his wife. His character's name is Bill, but he has a lawyer named George who was sleeping with his wife, and it's like, where does that all go? Like, it's like I said, you get little snippets of every bit of storyline with every episode, and I'm just so interested to find out where everything goes. Obviously, you had like Cooper as Dougie, going to his job. There's even this scene, like, before he went to his job, he was looking at his girl, you know, Dougie's girlfriend's son, and he was just looking at him in the car, and a tear rolled down his face. And it's like, what was that about? Like, I guess on some level, it's like, hey, he likes this kid and everything. He has fun with him. It's like, oh, you're awesome and everything. We smile, we give the thumbs up to each other, but it's like, now he's going away. I'm going away from him. Or maybe it's like, on some level, like Cooper knows it'll be the last time he sees him or something like that. And this is something I brought up, like I meant to bring it up in last week's episode, but I didn't. I left it in a comment, but it's like, it seems like even more so now as the episodes progress. It's like everything that's happening to Cooper is all steps to put him to where he needs to be. Like everything is leading to him. Like it seems like a very roundabout way to get him back to Twin Peaks, and along the way kind of turn him back into who he was before. At least that's where my mind is. Especially because in this episode, he was like, agent, case files. He's like, the guy he was getting the coffee from was like, damn good coffee. He's like, damn fine coffee. It's like, yeah, you know, slowly but surely becoming the Cooper that we've come to know and love. So, and we also had this whole thing with Tammy, the agent that went with Albert and Gordon in the last week's episodes, and it's like, she's looking at Cooper's files, and she's looking at a picture of Cooper, and she's comparing it to like the mugshot of, you know, Doppelganger Cooper, and it's just something doesn't quite fit right. And then there's like, she's looking at the fingerprints, and she's zooming in. I didn't really quite get what she was seeing, but like part of me was like, I couldn't really tell, but I was like, are they backwards or upside down? The whole doppelganger angle, is that like a mirror image of like, no, since they're doppelgangers, they're exact, like they'd have the exact fingerprints. I don't know, whatever it is, Tammy can tell something's off. She's just not sure what. And obviously Albert and Gordon know something's off. Obviously last episodes they were talking about, hey, we need to find, oh, do you know where she is? It's like, oh yeah, like, yeah, she would be the one to be able to tell us whether this is really Cooper or not, or what's going on here. So also, a little more elaboration on something I was curious about, because obviously during the original series, how the series ended with like Cooper coming back, and then in a reflection you see Bob. It's like in this they kind of continue that, because it is like doppelganger Cooper. So it was never the real Cooper that came back. It was a doppelganger Cooper, and Bob is inside him, because at one point he's looking in the mirror. He's like, I'm glad to see that you're still with me. And his face kind of morphs into Bob a little bit. So that kind of answers that for me. So, because I was always wondering, I was like, oh, so isn't that, so I was like, how's this Cooper here when there's the other Cooper? I thought you were just a doppelganger and having his body. It's like, no, this is doppelganger Cooper, and then Bob kind of was inside of doppelganger Cooper along for the ride, because he needs like a body to kind of exist. Maybe maybe in some shape or form, maybe he's been festering inside these past 25 years, you know, all for the purposes of getting a body of his own. Like, we still don't know what it is that Doppelganger Cooper is really after. I'd assume it has something to do with the Black Lodge. The whole thing was about going back to the Black Lodge and him not wanting to, like trying to make his stay here permanent. So then there's a whole like Jacoby selling those golden shovels that he was making. It's like, oh, these are for digging up crap. I mean, he's got his own like broadcast station. I don't know, like it looks like Jerry watches / listens, and so does Nadine, which we still don't know about that. Like, once again, that kind of goes along with the whole Norma and Big Ed situation. We don't know where that storyline kind of went, because the last time we saw Nadine, it was like, oh, Nadine kind of reverted back to herself. She got knocked on the head and remembered, oh, like, I'm a grown woman again. Like, also, like, got introduced to Doris, Frank, Sheriff Truman's, wife, Doris. She's a piece of work. And just Frank's just there like, yep, almost kind of, it's almost one of those situations like, yes, dear. Yes, dear. Mm-hmm. Sure thing, dear. She's like, you're too much. It's like, he hasn't really said anything. Oh, okay. And she kept bringing up Dwight. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like Dwight's daughter or something. Or maybe they have because she was talking about her father, and it's like Dwight, and it's like, wait, what, Dwight? Like, married Dwight? That's interesting. It's like, is she like, it's like, no, like, did Dwight have any kids? It has to be a different Dwight, because, like, Mayor Dwight didn't have any kids, did he? Makes me wonder whatever happened to Lana, too, now that I think about that. It's like, that was a whole thing, I mean, until she lost Miss Twin Peaks. But, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I want to know what happened in these 25 years. Slowly but surely we get filled in. But it's like, I want a clear cut of, like, this, and that happened. It's like, you're kind of getting filled in a little bit along the way of, like, what happened. And it's like, just tell me. I want a clear-cut picture of being like, this is what happened after that 25 years. I mean, it looks like they're little tiny side stories showing you where everyone is, but it's like, I don't know what they represent in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, you had that whole weird thing with doppelganger Cooper here is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna call Mr. Strawberry. And then like the warden was like, how did, like, that had some like, that hit some resonance with him. It was like, oh my god, that hit a nerve or something. Like Mr. Strawberry means something to him. It was like, what is that supposed to mean? Is that supposed to be like an affair situation? You had an affair with someone named Mr. Strawberry? Maybe that's the name he went by, that, some situation like that. It's just like, how does he know about that? And then he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna call somebody, and he calls and he keeps dialing number, and it calls all these like lights and stuff to flip out at the prison and everything. Alarms start going off, and he's just like, the cow goes over the moon and hangs up, and it's like everything stops. It's like, okay, what the hell was that? What does this mean? Because it seems like he's also trying to like clear cut know when and how everything happens. Because at one point he's laying in the bed in his cell, and then he's like, time for dinner, and it's like obviously the tray comes to him, and it's like, so you're trying to clear cut everything. Like, are you setting things in motion to kind of break you out of prison or what? Don't know. And then there's that weird thing at the Roadhouse that had that dude who was like, oh yeah, he's smoking a cigarette, and then like the other guy's like, oh, you need to stop, and then the other guy's like, oh, I'll take care of this. He's like, oh, do you have a pack? And gives him a pack, and inside is some money. So I guess that's some drug dealing still going on in Twin Peaks, I'd assume. Because I guess that whole like Shelly's daughter and that dude thing was kind of setting that up too. But then he starts getting all handsy with that girl at the end of the episode. I think her name was Charlotte, and it's like, what? Wait, what? And also, was that girl that stood up to him and was like, hey, let her go? Is that Jane? Is it Levy or Levi? Isn't that her? It looked like her. Like, obviously, like, she did that show, Supergatory. She was also obviously on, like, the Evil Dead remake. I think that might be her. Like I said, there are a lot of, like, recognizable actors in it. And like I brought it up before, that's so weird. Another thing too is obviously like Dougie is in a meeting and everything, and he sees a guy, and the guy's kind of saying something, and then Dougie Cooper's like, he's lying, because as the guy was talking, he saw these highlights in his face, and it's like, oh, like obviously he's supposed to represent, like, I guess his FBI instincts kind of kicking back in again. I mean, obviously we never got to see much of that in the original series, but it's like Cooper was always good at kind of reading people and stuff like that. So also another thing kind of happened in this episode too, and it was what's her name? Jada or Jade? The girl that was with, quote unquote, Dougie. It's like, oh yeah, we found this key in your car. She's like, okay, Dougie. And she mails it off because it's the Twin Peaks to his key to his room in the Great Northern. So it's like, because then my mind immediately goes, is that what Hulk is supposed to find? Is that the missing thing? Because it's something connected to Twin Peaks that's no longer there, that is also connected to Cooper? I mean, to me, that's the only thing. I mean, especially if it's being mailed off like that, that means that it might find its way back to Twin Peaks, is kind of how I assume about all that. Then also those guys steal after Dougie, obviously because he owes money to somebody. And then there's those poor bastards that blew up this episode. I was actually scared for a second. I was like, they wouldn't kill a kid in a TV show. I was like, don't tell me you're not really doing this. I was like, okay, the fact is he's about to touch and everything. I was like, oh, is it actually just a GPS? Is it not even an explosive? It's like, oh no, it's an explosive, because luckily he pulled away. I was like, oh, they're about to, and boom, it exploded. It's like, okay, kid immediately runs into his house. So, like I said, it seems like everything's kind of working out to prevent, Cooper from getting too caught up in everything. Because if he was clear cut himself, like, it's because he's kind of like a hollow shell that's kind of like, it's almost like he's there, but it's like in this entire time, it's like his soul is kind of slowly being built up. It's like leaving the Black Lodge the way he did, it seemed like it almost like shattered his soul, and it's slowly coming back together. A little bit of his consciousness and who he was is slowly coming back. But it's like if he was fully Cooper, then maybe there are multiple instances where it's like, oh, that wouldn't have worked out for you. So I'm guessing it's a situation where it's like all of this is leading Cooper to be where he needs to. It's like he can't, because if he was Cooper now, he'd just go straight to it and try and get this whole thing settled. It's like, no, you have to go the long way around and become yourself again to help figure out this whole situation. I'm assuming, I'm just making my own conclusions here. So also, I'm wondering where that whole casino storyline is going to take. Like I said, I feel like that's all. Like I said, like even though everything seems so separated, I feel like there are threads, very thin threads connecting everything because it's like there is like a full circle. I mean, even in the original Twin Peaks, everything was connected to everything. Like even, I mean, not directly, but even indirectly, a lot of stuff was connected, even like the situations of like, oh, these certain people are having affairs. It's like overall that had like a huge impact on the story. So I'm feeling like every little part, every little piece plays in the grand puzzles, and like I said, just not seeing the full picture yet. But the thing is, like, the fact is that the casino keeps popping up again makes me think that Cooper's going to find his way back there somehow in some shape or form because they're like, yeah, tell us if this guy pops up here again. So we would just kind of have to wait and see like what it all means. Especially this whole situation with Briggs' fingerprints. Do you think, because the guy said, Ernie Hudson's character was like, yeah, because if it is him, we'll have to call in the FBI. So maybe this has all been leading towards, I mean, we don't know for sure it was him, but like, I'd assume it was him. But it's like, why would he kill Dougie? Or is it someone else, or rather something else? Because we still don't know about that whole thing from that glass cube that the FBI is kind of aware of now, that thing that was there and then disappeared. So once again, I felt like that thing was chasing Cooper, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it just happened to pop in after he did. Just seems too coincidental, and just coincidence in this series you shouldn't kind of take lightly. But the thing is, I was thinking, like, since it happened over the past 25 years, maybe everything has subsequently been leading them, getting them close to Doppelganger Cooper, but they just miss him by a hair or something like that. Maybe that's what it's all about. Because obviously, if this gets the FBI involved, then it turns into a situation of like tying them into all this. Like I said, plus we know that Gordon and Albert are looking for, like, who I brought up last episode. Could it either be Annie or Audrey? I'm leaning more towards Audrey. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, it might just be Diane for all we know. Because I just thought about that. I was like, right. I keep forgetting. I think it's because I forget Diane exists because she never pops up, whether it was a Twin Peaks movie or the TV show. She was always like, she always said Cooper stuff, but she was never seen or heard from. So it was like, maybe she might be the one. Because she now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I was like, that's a good fit too. So, but once again, it's like, I'd prefer it to be Annie just to see, the lovely Heather Graham, but also obviously correlate that to the story because, she was like the last part of that story too. Like, oh, what happened to Annie? But like I said, just randomly throwing out these thoughts and everything. We'll just kind of have to wait till next episode and see if any of this is true or not, or if any of this is even remotely close to being right. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.